Hey guys, welcome back to the Prehistoric Life podcast. And today we're interviewing Jason from the Fossil Fiend. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's right.
Here's his Instagram page for any of y'all who's interested in following him. So, I mean, let's get the obvious question out of the way. Everybody's probably wondering, what's your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur would be the Parasaurolophus.
Parasaurolophus. I've got one of their skulls right here. I mean, we've been doing the
Oh,
Hadrosaur
that's
month
awesome.
this month.
Yeah,
Been
I saw it. I've been listening to your podcast. Yeah.
been talking about all the cool different hadrosaurs and trying to figure out how they sounded and just talking about them. So I guess you said you came back from a dig last week.
Yes. My son and I were in South Dakota, digging in the Hell Creek Formation there on the western and northwestern sides of the state.
So I guess you got a lot of fun stories from that. I mean, that's not something I guess you
Oh,
get to.
yeah.
I guess you get to do that often, but it's not something that everybody really gets to do. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's we've been doing that since 2009. We go
wow.
up and we work with a paleontologist named Walter Stein. He has a company out of Belfouche, South Dakota, that's called Paleo Adventures. And what he does is he takes guests out and they can dig in his quarries and actually see what it's like to be a paleontologist for a day.
That's actually really cool. I'll try to reach out to him or something because
Oh
that
yeah,
sounds something very interesting. So,
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I guess what kind of tools do you use whenever you're doing that? I mean,
The most common tools that you'll use is an X-Acto knife and a paintbrush.
as you gotta get the dirt off, and I guess you have to use the X-Acto knife to
Yeah,
cut
you
the
you
bone off.
just you just use the X-Acto knife just to break and lift small little sections of the matrix, and you break up a little bit of it, and then you brush it away and see if anything's exposed, and you just keep working your way. The rock there is a really soft rock. It's called a mudstone. When it gets wet, it's actually like almost muddy.
So I guess that we do you like wetten it first and then try to take some of the layers off like that?
No, it's better when it's dry.
Really?
Yeah, because
I guess if it's muddy, it would stick to the bone.
yeah, when it's wet, it wants to stick to everything, including the fossil. When it's dry, it'll actually pop away from the surface of the fossil pretty easily. So if once you break the layer, or if you're brushing, it'll brush and expose the fossil pretty easily. But if it's wet, it just wants to stick to everything, and then you can't see stuff near as well.
I mean, yeah, I guess it would. Is it kind of like a paste where it would kind of just stick the thing where it's like gluish?
No, it's not that bad, but
It's
it's not.
noticeable.
It's just noticeable. It's just kind of leaves a muddy, sandy film on everything that doesn't brush away. So it makes it a lot harder to see the small details of stuff, or notice small fossils like teeth and things like that.
So, what kind of dinosaurs did y'all find, or animals, or creatures of the
And
prehistoric
it
age?
it is mostly dinosaurs. There's a few mammals, some fish, some turtles, but it's mostly dinosaurs. Uh, the Edmontosaurus annectens is the most common find up there, probably that and Triceratops. But the quarry he works in most is called the Tooth Draw Quarry, and it has an insane amount of tyrannosaur teeth. It's like if you look at a quarry map, because he logs the locations of everything, and he periodically updates a quarry map showing the locations of exactly where everything is. And he's pulled thousands of teeth out of a area that he's moved back probably, I don't know, maybe 50 feet. It's all people find T-Rex teeth almost every day there.
That's yeah. I guess there was some kind of T-Rex convention going on there.
It was probably a large feeding area
Yeah,
where a lot of them came and fed and that lost teeth.
well, there's a lot of Edmontosaurus. For those of you who didn't watch that episode, that's what Edmontosaurus looks like. If there were like a lot of large animals like that, like Triceratops here, you would probably have a lot of larger carnivores that would hunt them. So I guess yeah, they would all crowd to one area if there were a large group of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, do they vary? Is it like a large range, or is it like oddly one size of tooth?
No, it's a full range.
The full range. So
Yeah, there's everything from actual like you would call a baby T-Rex teeth have been found, all the way up to like massive full size adult incisors, like the murder bananas that they call them.
the murder bananas. And for those of you who do not know what a T-Rex looks like, for some reason, that's a rough look of what one looks like.
It's a good tyrannosaurid.
Yeah. So, of course, there's the whole debate about if they're feathered or not. Did you see any like up close, like any form of like featherage or quill or something that you can definitely tell in the imprint of like the rock?
No, the formation here where they were deposited was a river channel, and so there's most of what is there is they had died on the shore and they had already begun to decompose before the bones got washed in. So there's no skin impressions or anything left in this area that we're working.
Oh, yeah, that would probably defeat that. And I don't know if you watched it, but we talked to the fossil crates people, and we talked a lot about dinosaur lips. Is there any like way to tell on the fossil what that would like look like? Well, I guess that would also be skin impression, wouldn't it?
Well, from what I have read is that they're like if you have lips that there's actual like connective tissue that's identifiable on the bone. And I think I've read that they have seen that in tyrannosaurs. Now, the extent of the lips, I don't know if they were like complete full that covered all the teeth, or maybe covered
Like
half the
half of it.
teeth and the bigger ones were still kind of sticking out. I think that's pure guesswork right now. Until they find one with skin impressions of a complete skull, we're just guessing.
So I guess, yeah, I guess that would be kind of hard because it does leave like that rough tension, I guess would be the word, to like on the upper jaw, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think there's some kind of marks on the bone when you have that structure.
So you said you saw a lot of Triceratops. Of course,
Yeah.
they have the famous three horns. How big were like the horns, would you say, in comparison to the actual animal itself?
Oh, that's pretty. I think it depends on the size or the age of it. It also depends a lot on the exact species. There's quite a few different species of Triceratops, but a lot of the horns, they could easily be 2 to 3 foot long.
So that, yeah,
And
that's pretty big.
yeah,
And I was reading something where the horns could have actually been thicker because that could have been just like the root of the horn, and like stuff would have grown around it.
right. Well, what we find of their horns are it's a horn core.
Yeah, the
It's kind
cone.
of kind of like when you see a cow skull. There's a horn core, and then there's a keratin sheath that is the
Yeah.
actual external horn. So they know from the shape of the horn core, the texturing of it, that they definitely had a keratin sheath over it. And but I don't think any impressions have been found so far that show exactly how much larger the sheath was compared to the bone core.
So I mean, the sheath could have been like 5 to 8 feet long for all we know.
Yeah, the some animals I've heard have a sheet, keratin sheath that's double the size of the core, and I think like you know 15-20% is probably more common, but if you got a 3 foot horn core, it's within the realm of possibility that it could have been a 6 foot long horn.
So do you think that could also vary on like the species of ceratopsian? So
Oh,
like
I'm sure it did.
so like something like Triceratops where maybe it grows out versus something like Styracosaurus where it grows up. Do you think that could
Yeah,
have like, some kind of effect?
probably.
Because I feel like growing it up would be easier than out. So maybe that would have some kind of effect. And I guess in light of Hadrosaur month, and you were talking about the Edmontosaurus. What were their remains looking like?
Uh, uh, well, most of the items we find, they're disarticulated. You don't full skeletons aren't super common, but there's a lot of disarticulated bones. Uh, as far as what they look like, or how exactly are you asking? Like
I
shape
mean,
or size or?
well, I mean, like size, maybe how they died, maybe if you can tell that.
Oh no, that's usually pretty hard to tell unless you can find like something diagnostic. Like if you find a major bone with bite marks on it, you can tell by looking at that if they started to heal or not. So if they have bite marks that did not heal, they most likely died of that wound or associated wounds. If there's healing on it, then that means they got away and they survived. So you can kind of tell a little bit
So
that
kind
way.
of like
But
like kind of like how deep the bone or the like bite wound is on the bone, maybe.
well, if when bone heals, it gets kind of frothy and spongy looking. It'll form a callus around the wound, and so when they can look at the bone and see if it has healed damage like that.
And then I guess if you find like a bone completely shattered, then it's like okay, well they died from this wound.
Yeah, that'd be pretty easy to guess that they died from that.
So you were in the Hell's Creek formation. Is that like dried up now and it was a creek in prehistoric times?
Yes. What the Hell Creek got its name from an actual creek that I think is Wyoming. I can't remember if it's Wyoming or Montana. I think it's in Wyoming. Um, but what it was 66 million years ago was a river, kind of a swampy, braided river delta. It's a lot like what you would see if you go to the Carolina coast or
I'm right there on it.
Georgia
I know what
or
you mean.
Louisiana. So it's kind of like a lot of it is like that. It's small, medium river channels, a lot of swamps. The river channels move back and forth a lot, so you have a lot of layers.
A
But
lot of
now
flooding too.
it's all sand. Yeah, a lot of flooding too.
Do you think that also like affected locations of bones?
Oh, I'm sure it did. The tooth draw quarry that Walter works primarily in is he believes that it's trying to think exactly the term he uses. Basically, when river channels change course, they can cut off and leave old segments behind. They get called, those are called an oxbow lake, and a big flood came and washed out one of the blocking walls from the river to an oxbow lake and flooded that with all this material, all the bones and everything that were washing down in the flood, broke that wall and pushed all that into that Oxbow Lake. So yeah,
Yeah.
flooding definitely had a huge impact on fossil deposits.
So I guess the fossils would like you'd get like a weird conglomerate of just fossils in general, and it would be hard to like you have to sit
Yes.
there for like hours, I guess, just breaking them apart, trying to figure out which dinosaur they belong to.
Well, they're not really conglomerates, but they're definitely jumbled together. Like, because you can find a T-Rex bone next to a hadrosaur bone with uh, teeth of something else mixed in with turtle bits of turtle and crocodile and fish scales. It's all just it's jumbled together, but it's not like a concretion where it's in a mass together, if you know what I'm saying.
I get what you mean. So basically kind of they were just kind of just stacked on top of each other just over
Yeah, just kind of
billions of years.
just all tumbled together and all they kind of pile up in some areas and thin out in other areas.
So, yeah, like I don't know if you've ever been, but in Utah they have Dinosaur National Park, and it's just like they have this wall of just fossils that were just stacked on top of each other,
Yes,
kind of like
it's
that.
an amazing place. Well, yeah, that is
Similar to that.
probably something similar to that. I think what you see there is they weren't really stacked on top of each other. The bedding plane has been elevated through geologic activity. That was originally flat, and they were all laid down on the same bed, and then through time that's got lifted up, and
Raised up
so now it's just a big 45-degree wall filled with bones.
fossils, and I mean, yeah, I mean, from what it sounds like, I mean, you travel a lot and you dig up a lot of dinosaur bones and you go on these digs. So, well, what is your just craziest story from one of these digs? That's like one of your biggest finds. Something crazy happened.
Well, I don't know. Probably the craziest thing was either our first or second year with Walter, and his operation was only a few years old then, and he didn't have all the quarries set up that he does now. He had the tooth draw quarry that's always been his main site, and so we had dug there with him in the morning, and in the afternoon he would take guests out walking the Badlands. To go out. You can see what stuff looks like as it's eroding out. Kind of learn what it looks like as you actually find it in the wild, not when you're just uncovering it from the ground. So we're walking, and he takes us down this water erosional channel that's probably only, I don't know, maybe 8 foot wide. Just a couple. You could walk a couple people down it, and we're walking down. He's behind me and my son, and there's something sticking out of the wall, but it's covered in the sandy mud from the rain. At the time, didn't didn't dawn on me that something poking out of the wall should trigger your investigation. You should go, hey, what is that?
That might be a fossil. Yeah.
So we just walked past, but Walter, yeah, that might be a fossil. So we walk
Walk past
along,
it
but
next to me.
Walter sees something that he sees it, and there's a piece that is broken out. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't say anything. You keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, Walter sees it, and he looks down below it, and a piece had broken off, and he picks it up. And he's like, "Oh, where did you come from?" Because he immediately recognizes the texture and the density and the size. And this is T-Rex. And so he starts cleaning off the protrusion, and it is a end of a tibia of a T-Rex sticking out of the wall. And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to come back and excavate and tear this wall back." And see if there's more of this in here. So, and he goes back later in the year and he takes that out, and he names this T-Rex from this one piece of leg. He names it Leonard because that is the name of the property owner who he leases from. So we were there for this first discovery of the first bit of Leonard, and but he didn't find anything else there. Then a
Just
few
part of
years
the
later,
tibia.
Walter sends us, yeah, just about probably half of the tibia.
Okay.
And so a few years later, uh, Walter sent us back over there. We were digging with a group, and he's like, "Hey, go back over there to this site and do some digging. I want to see if this is worth opening up into a quarry, into a new quarry for gas." So we go over there and we start digging. We start finding stuff, and that became known as Tooth Draw West. Now, Tooth Draw West is starting to give up a lot more of Leonard. He's now got two femurs and some vertebra and some other bits. So the rest of Leonard is in there somewhere. It's just a matter of getting him exposed. So that's kind of the coolest thing, that we were there for the first bit of the discovery of Leonard, and
And you
eventually
helped
it'll
bring him
probably end up being a yeah.
complete eventually over time. So do you
Yeah.
think
And then oh, go ahead.
do you think that like as it was decomposing other and the ground's shifting, just other parts of Leonard were just like broken off and just moved to different parts of the rock?
It was probably in the river system. It may have
And it
even been dead on the shoreline, or in the water, and then the flood spread it out.
walked away.
Yeah, but those bones are big and they're heavy, and
They're
there's
not gonna
enough that's been found recently. I mean, in a fairly small space, that Walter feels that it's probably mostly there.
so I guess there have been very few prehistoric creatures where we've just found the entire thing.
Oh yeah,
So
that's really rare for most of them.
yeah. So I mean, do you think that like part of the rock could like split the bone in half and then like you could find like a weird part where like half of the dinosaur is up top and the other half is like really far down?
It could, if you had a lot of geological shifting in a location, that it could fault and separate it, and one could be higher and one could be lower, or it could be that part of it has already started to erode and simply washed down to a lower elevation and then gotten recovered. That can happen too.
So I mean, I guess there are other like creatures that could have had like more fragile bones that just eroded away
Oh
that we
yeah,
don't know.
like especially the birds,
Yeah, yeah.
and their bones are super small. They're hollow. They're extremely fragile. Any intact bone from one of the birds at the time is extremely rare, just because they are so fragile.
And I guess smaller dinosaurs would also have the same problem, like
Yes,
smaller mammals.
yes. It's kind of it's called a preservational bias. You tend to find a lot of the big dinosaurs because their bones are large and strong, and they survive a lot of weathering and water activity and the fossilization process. Whereas something really small, like the little bitty, uh, like the birds, the mammals, things like that, a lot of their bones didn't survive. So the smaller stuff is harder to find, but it can be way more scientifically important.
So I mean, the bones are just eroded, like parts of them are like eroding away regardless. So do you think that the bones could have been like thicker and these dinosaurs that we think are already so big could be bigger?
No, the because when we find them, their bone structure is the same then as it is now. So you can look at the outside of a bone and tell if it has been eroded or if it is still intact and the same as it would have been in its life. And so they know that when they look at a bone, this is exactly how it was. There's no erosion. It hasn't lost anything during the process.
So circling back to the Edmontosaur thing. So you have these hadrosaurs that make these this odd music with like their crests and their larynx and their vocalization. Why do you think they evolved to be more vocal, I guess would be the word?
It would probably be because they were largely a prey animal. There was a lot of them, and I think a lot of different things fed on them. And if you can be vocal, then you can give out warnings. They traveled in herds. So if you have a big group, it's a lot easier for one to make a noise that can alert everybody that there's danger in the area. So if you didn't have the possibility of vocalization, you couldn't warn others.
Because, of course, now we know that all the dinosaurs don't sound like the Jurassic Park T-Rex. Well, we know that
Right.
now, and they're a lot more vocal. And even the T-Rex, as we know now, sounds a lot more different than the famous T-Rex roar from Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Where it's got that, I guess it would be like a deeper bellow, wouldn't it?
I've heard it described that it would probably be similar to a very large crocodile,
Yeah, that's what I
almost
was.
a vibrational instead of a noise.
So, do you think were any dinosaurs that like roared like that?
It would have to be in the realm of possibility. I'm
I
sure
don't,
there that definitely could have been.
I don't see why there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess like velociraptors, we know that they hunt. We thought that they were pack hunters, but now we know that they hunt more like wolves.
I'm not sure. I haven't studied that much up on velociraptors.
I was reading somewhere that they might have hunted more like wolves, and there was like a possibility that they weren't really like fighting for big prey, but they would more go off on their own. And if they found big prey, they would basically ask other velociraptors for help.
I don't see why it wouldn't be possible.
Because,
I mean, basically, any kind of animal behavior we see today was probably happened within some species back then as well.
I mean, you look at like the evolutionary just difference between all these dinosaurs, and it just makes you think like in where in the evolutionary tree did like Pachycephalosaurus get its dome from? Like
Yeah.
versus why didn't it just get like a giant spike on its head?
I mean, what or how did one become Packy and how did one become Draco?
I mean, yeah, I mean, where would that evolutionary like why would that evolutionary tree split? It's just so bizarre to think about.
It is there. There had to have been some kind of environmental pressure or opportunity that made that viable for the animal, but exactly what that was, we really can only guess at.
I mean, because isn't like Draco Rex smaller than Pachycephalosaurus?
Um, the skulls I've seen were roughly the same
That's
size.
the thing. So, I mean, they could have been the same size. I mean, they're about as big as like a human. So, well, they're
Almost.
way more. In
Yeah,
height, they're
I
about
think.
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also something bizarre that we always think that these dinosaurs are big, hulking creatures, but like a lot of them are like as tall as a person.
Yeah. A lot of them were a lot smaller than, there were obviously the giant ones, but there were also a lot of them that weren't nearly that large.
Like Ceratosaurus was about as big as like a full grown man. So about as tall. I won't say as big. And I mean, you have like the Krylophosaurus, where it was founded in Antarctica. My
Yeah.
question is like, what paleontologist was just like, I'm gonna go dig in Antarctica and hope I find something? I, I'm curious how that came about.
It was probably exactly that. It's probably
Just,
like, hey, there's rock there. Let's go see if there's any fossils in it.
'cause, I mean, we know that there wasn't really any like nomadic tribe there because they probably would have just freeze to death. But it it totally, like, you think about it, it's totally within the realm of just reasonability that Antarctica had dinosaurs on it because I mean Pangea was all just one giant continent. And when Antarctica broke away, it just moved south and just got cold.
Yeah.
And uh, same thing with the Alaskan T Rex. I mean, the I love trying to pronounce dinosaur names. The Nanocosaurus,
Oh, Nanookosaurus.
Nanocosaurus.
Yeah, they named it after one of the local tribes, I believe.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, these dinosaurs make sense to have like fur, like body fur,
It would have, because
some kind of
they
hair.
said it still would have been cold.
It wouldn't be like
So
freezing cold like it is now, but it would have still been a lot cooler. So, but like you look at something like Allosaurus in the deserts of Utah, where it would have been way hotter. Would there be some sort of different type of like subspecies of Allosaurus that had feathers versus one that maybe didn't?
I suppose it's possible.
Because also talking back to the fossil craze people, we were talking about sauropods. There's no way that they would have had feathers. There's no reason for them. There's no like bone evidence of them having one because they're already so big and carrying so much weight. They would just use that for heat, if anything.
Yeah.
But also something like a ceratopsian. I mean, would they really have had feathers? I mean,
I'm pretty sure that they have found skin impressions
of
from
some that had
ceratopsians that, and they say they did not. They
they don't.
had almost a elephantine. It was kind of a rough, almost pebbly
It's not
look
like a
to it.
bird. It's not like a
Yeah,
bird,
not
but more like the small hairs on an elephant or a rhino.
if they had anything, it would probably have been like that. Something very, very, very small.
Also, it's really weird to think about is like the time between all of the different dinosaurs versus like modern. So you get like T Rex is actually closer to what was it, the invention of the iPhone than it is the Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
And I got a time chart that I refer to here, usually pretty big. It goes all the way to what would be the Cambrian period, all the way up to like modern time.
Yeah, when you think about it, if we go out in the Badlands, we can walk over T-Rex bones. T-Rex were most likely walking on top of stegosaur bones. Stegosaurs were probably walking on top of, uh, you know, Permian era bones.
They were
So,
walking on very early, like Cambrian period bones. It's like
yeah,
so crazy to think about that, like these creatures like evolved from almost nothing, really. Like you think about it, like you look at the evolutionary tree, you see like the small fish that gets out of the water, and you look at that and you just think, how did that turn into a T Rex? It just
yeah. A
Doesn't seem like it
long,
would kill
long
it.
chain.
And you also have like things like the last mammoths were around during the Egyptian Empire,
Yeah.
the height of it's, which is really funny because thinking about that, like historical figures could like meet a mammoth. There's like that possibility that somebody knew about that.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I guess they would have other dinosaurs that would not necessarily hunt another species to extinction, but would definitely like the species would evolve, and I guess other dinosaurs would kill off the remains of the old species, which I guess is why something like Stegosaurus wasn't around fighting T-Rex, but there were like stegosaur creatures around during the T-Rex time.
Yeah. Yeah. The entire evolutionary chain is still being studied and hotly debated in how things evolve and change into other things.
I mean, it's all cause and effect if you really think about it. I mean, you get one big creature that dominates all over these other creatures. The other creatures are going to eventually adapt and change to be able to hide or fight or run from these other creatures.
Yeah.
It's like drawing parallels between like Ornithomimus and Parasaurolophus. I mean, there was probably like an evolutionary tree where they were both being hunted by big predators. Parasaurolophus decided to get bigger, but like stay in bigger packs, but grow the what do you call it? The crest to be vocal. While Struthiomimus evolved to be smaller, quicker, more agile.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't.
Everything is everything is always trying to change to be better at hunting or better at evading.
It's all survival. I mean,
Yep.
why T Rex evolved to have tiny arms like that? Who knows? I mean, do we still know the purpose of the tiny arms? Have we learned that yet? Is that something that's
I,
popped up?
I've heard theory on it, which makes sense to me. They say that because its mouth was its primary tool, its head and its mouth grew larger to be more effective, which added more weight, which made it more front heavy. So then smaller arms kind of offset that and took away some of that front weight to make it more balanced.
I
So
guess
as the head grew bigger, it made sense for their arms to kind of shrink.
grow smaller. So I mean, like I always have this debate. Does something like a Triceratops really have two legs and two arms, or does it have four legs?
I think it would be considered as four legs
Because
because I think since it's always walking on them, that you would consider it as legs.
you always think like I always think about that because it doesn't have like two sets of hips, but it has a set of hips and a set of shoulders, but it walks on all fours.
Yeah,
But something like a hadrosaur where it will walk on all fours but run on two legs as its way of getting away. Would you consider that bipedal or quadrupedal? Quadrupedal.
I think you would consider it facultative quadrupedal. Like it doesn't have to be, but it can be,
I
or you
guess it
could
would be
call it facultative bipedalism. It can do either one, but it's not locked into one or the other.
so they. I mean, it's basically just like I mean, like I guess bears are kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Because you get the whole thing where they stand on their two legs, but you always see them walking and running on all fours.
Yeah.
So I guess we should address the idea of the Jurassic Park Velociraptor.
I mean, Dinochirus?
Dinochirus,
Yeah. Well, because
yeah,
what they used was not in the movie was not Velociraptor.
it was
Velociraptors
based
are
on
very
Deinonychus,
tiny.
I think.
What's
Wasn't it?
that?
Wasn't it based on Deinonychus? Or
Oh, you're right. I said it wrong. Was
yeah,
Deinonychus.
you got like Deinosuchus, you got Dino other thing, you got Deinonychus, you got. But also, that's weird that they would base it on Deinonychus, but not make it feathered, because Deinonychus was actually the first dinosaur that challenged the theory of all dinosaurs just being reptiles.
Yeah, but you got to think about back in 1992 when they were making the movie, feathers on dinosaurs was like extremely controversial.
Yeah,
I mean, they had barely accepted that some dinosaurs were warm-blooded.
it's another thing that seems like a weird evolutionary trait, but also makes sense. So I mean, and then I guess like after the film, they discovered Utah Raptor.
Yeah,
So then they were just like that. He's going to be that.
yeah,
So I mean, I've been
yeah.
seeing a lot of new stuff about Dunkleosaurus, the armored fish,
Oh, Dunkleosteus.
or yeah, dunk. Latin, not my strong suit.
Yeah,
The armored fish. Don't know why it's all blurry. So what you want to talk about that a little? I mean, I don't really. I've seen that they
I don't.
said it might be smaller or something.
Yeah, there was a paper that came out this year saying that it was. They believe it was the body was smaller than has been envisioned in the past by the paleo artist because they looked at the problem was we have the head we don't have a complete body because they had a lot of cartilage, so we find the bony head but not the entire thing.
I mean,
So
the
they kind of
giant.
estimated based
Yeah,
on, I think modern sharks was what they based the body
based
dimensions
on.
from the skull, and then they found some other correlations. They say, well, this kind of fish is a better correlation, and so if we scale the body compared to that, then it actually made the whole thing smaller and a little chunkier than what we have traditionally seen.
I mean, yeah, I guess like the body isn't really preserved that well because fish bones don't. They're pretty hollow, aren't they?
Yeah,
So they
yes,
snap and
and
they grind away.
well, and I'm not sure if this one was a cartilaginous fish or not. So it may not have like actual bones to preserve like we're used to.
Other
You know,
than the
the
giant
other than
plated
the
skull,
yeah.
which is, I mean, weren't they also cannibalistic? So
I don't know. I haven't seen anything on that.
that
But
might be
you know,
that might
a
be changed.
lot of things are opportunistic feeders.
I mean, I'm sure it's just survival of the fittest. So I mean, that's how most animals are anyway. So
Yeah,
I mean, like sharks don't they eat their own babies if they need to?
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, I thought like great white sharks will eat other great white shark babies. So I mean, I don't see why something like a giant T Rex, if it can't find food and it's just another baby T Rex, I don't see why it wouldn't take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, it probably would have.
They were also uh, those large theropods also tended to be scavengers too, which is something that's
Right. Well, they wouldn't give up a free meal if it's in front of them.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you see a giant dead sauropod taken down by something bigger. I mean, chow down.
Yep. Exactly.
That the whole sauropod thing where they grow massive so other predators wouldn't kill them, but then you get just predators that are just going to hunt them. That's pretty insane to think about.
It's
So
probably very similar to modern whales. Whales are so big that nothing in the ocean can really take them down. But if you've got young or sick, then they would probably go after that. And when they
yeah,
find a dead one, then they definitely go after it.
I mean, also have you there's a new thing about the Allosaurus about how they would kill.
I haven't seen that.
So apparently it's more like a hawk, so it would basically just pin you down and let you basically just struggle till you're exhausted, and it would just like rip at your flesh while you're still alive,
Hmm. Yeah.
which was really insane to think about that a big old creature like that would just step on you and let you just slowly suffocate to death basically or exhaust yourself to death. There's
Well,
a
it'd probably be a safer way to kill prey for it also, because a lot of animals are very, very leery of getting wounded, because if you get a
yeah.
wound, you know that could kill you. So if they can take out prey with less danger to themselves, then I'm sure they definitely do that.
I mean, to me, probably I don't know about everybody else. One of the most famous examples of that is the Allosaurus Big Al, where it broke its toe or something and it couldn't walk, so it basically just had to roll over and die.
Hmm.
I mean, a major
Yeah.
wound to like the foot would leave you open to other predators. It could get infected. You could
Yep.
bleed out.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess wounds like that were. I've also seen something about cranial face biting during combat, where creatures would aim for the face. Do you think that could have something to do with like, I guess, their own form of some weird bio warfare kind of thing where they bite you and wait for you to get an infection in your face and you can't see or your brain stops working?
Yeah, it's a possibility.
I mean,
They probably be hoping for a quicker kill, but if you were wounded enough that you're going to die a week later from it, then yeah, I'm sure they'd take it either way.
they'd probably just stop. I mean, like, you could damage with Triceratops' back leg and it can't walk, but that doesn't mean it's defenseless.
Right.
I mean, it's still going to try to defend itself out of preservation of its own life. So, I mean, I guess the creatures would just stay out of range, wait for it to just die of starvation or thirst or
That
whatever.
that'd be an
And,
easy way for them to do it.
I mean, honestly, it's probably one of the safest ways to do it. Just take out its way of transportation and just, if you can't take it out completely, just wait for it to roll over and die.
Yeah, well, we see that in modern animals, so I'm sure they did it too.
I mean, hyenas do that, don't they? They would like attack something and like damage it really badly and then just kind of wait for it to just accept its fate,
Hmm. I'm not sure. I
or they try to wait it out
possibility.
or something. Do you think that like, because obviously the herbivore or a lot of these dinosaurs lived in packs. They lived in pairs or packs or trios or something. So do you think they had like you look at like elephants where you have a leader of the pack that would kind of lead everybody and help everybody? Do you think they had some form of system like that?
Oh,
Because
that'd be speculation, but it would. I don't see why it's not possible.
I've heard that like ceratopsians are kind of like that, where they would have one like big kind of alpha and ceratopsian that would kind of lead everybody and protect the herd, basically.
Well, it's certainly a good theory.
I mean, also, what do you think about the defense circle of the famous defense circle of the ceratopsians? Do you think that was like
I don't know. I
'cause I
mean,
mean that seems to be something that would be like really effective.
yeah, it seems like it would be effective.
I
I
mean,
think it takes a certain type of pack mentality and pack behavior to coordinate that, which, there's, you can argue whether they had developed that or not.
because I mean, they say that like Stegosaurus is quote unquote stupid because it had a small brain or like an area for a brain cavity, but was it really dumb or did it just like prioritize survival over like some sort of cognitive thinking form?
That's beyond my study that I've done.
I mean, like, was it really like just a lizard brain, bird brain kind of thing where it just like, I know how to eat, sleep, reproduce, and that's it? Move to the next meal. Or did it really have some form of cognitive thinking that we're overlooking? And I guess that's something that you can't really test because we already have like enough trouble testing the IQ of modern animals. So I couldn't imagine extinct animals.
Yeah, I think they can look at the shape of the brain and they can kind of figure out, like, based on size of certain things, like how much of their brain was focused on smell or sight or movement, things like that. But
Yeah.
as far as cognitive, I don't know if there's any way to try and figure that out.
I mean, I guess pack mentality or herd mentality or whatever you want to call it is kind of a trait that's in most animals to where they're drawn to their own. But I guess there are a few outliers. Like you look at something like Therizinosaurus, where I don't know if it would really have like a herd mentality. They seem like they would be alone.
I don't think enough has been found on them to determine, like, the ceratopsians, they have found evidence that they most likely did at least spend some of their time in herds or packs. But a lot of the fossils we don't have enough specimens of that we found to be able to determine, oh, we found nests of, and we know this is a therizinosaur, and there's 50 nests here, so they had to have congregated, or we only ever find a single nest. I think we need more fossils.
Yeah. Was it like we've only identified like over 900 species of dinosaur, but they're thought to be like thousands more, like
Oh,
millions.
yeah, I'm sure there are many that we'll never know, because you have to have an area that's conducive to fossilization in order to create it in the first place. So
Yeah.
you have to have a lot of deposition. So anything that lived, like in the hills or the mountains, all that is eroding away anyway. So even if they did fossilize somewhere in there, they eventually eroded out. So there's so many species that we'll never know
I
what
mean,
there
like,
was.
think about like all the like ocean dinosaurs that we will probably never know about, and even dinosaurs that were on Pangea, and then whenever the spot continent split, their fossils went into the water. I mean, it's not easy to excavate out of the ocean, and I couldn't imagine excavating in the middle of like next to the Mariana Trench. I mean,
Well, there wouldn't be any fossils there anyway. That's too young of a rock. In the ocean, mid-ocean trenches, those are areas where the continents are splitting and there's magma coming up and creating new rock and it's splitting and pushing apart. So all that is way too young. Almost all the fossils are going to be a lot closer to shore, but I'm sure there are a lot of them that are currently underneath the ocean closer to continents that we haven't seen yet. And we may never see just because they'd be so hard to get to.
Yeah. So, of course, one of the craziest things that's going on in the dinosaur world is the debate over Spinosaurus, the ever-growing,
The ever
changing
changing.
evolution of what Spinosaurus looked like.
Yeah. Well, every time we find more of them,
We've
we
got,
find more evidence of what they probably look like. I mean, all the dinosaurs, what we think they look like, has changed quite a bit over time.
I mean, yeah. So, who knows? We might find one that says it's like this species isn't really Spinosaurus, and it's some weird subsection of it, and Spinosaurus was completely aquatic. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's like Beckley spinax, which is just it looks pretty much like Spinosaurus, but it's like smaller, and that's the only real difference. Which is another
Yeah.
thing that's kind of odd to me. That like I guess you did get like things like skull structure and certain bones you can look at and tell the difference, but like some species look like just another species but smaller. And it's like, how do you know that that's a new species and not a species we've already found that's just like a smaller or younger version?
Yeah. Some of that they can do with bone histology, but yeah, I'm sure there were smaller species and larger species of very similar animals.
Because I mean, like, you get like the subspecies of different triceratops, but they're all triceratops. So, I mean, do you think there's like that could be something for like, because I mean, you have things like Albertosaurus, like Gorgosaurus, and T Rex, and Tarbosaurus, and all these other Tyrannosaurids, but they all look like T Rex. So I guess there is like a missing link between whatever came before T Rex and Tyrannosaurids.
Yeah,
Before,
they've all got a common ancestor somewhere, most likely. Probably somewhere in China.
probably. That's another thing that I was actually like looking at, like fossils on in like China are they might be better. They're like better preserved because like the closer you get to the impact site of the meteor, the famous KT extinction,
Hmm.
I mean, it makes sense that all the dinosaurs in that area would be more damaged and torn up and ripped apart. A giant rock hit the earth. I mean, that causes some damage.
Yeah, it's also the environment where they lived and were preserved in, and China's just got some amazing preservational areas and a lot of areas where there's a lot of weathering and where nobody lives. So they can just spend a lot of time searching out there in the middle of their badlands.
Yeah, I guess they also, I'm sure that all the what do you call them, paleontologists over there are, I mean, there's a lot of China that's kind of not city,
Yeah.
and there's like you look at some countries where it's like France and Britain and Germany where they're very industrialized, so a lot of the fossils there are kind of lost because you can't dig up an entire city to search under it. But something like Russia or China or even like Mongolia and I guess America and like Canada, where not all of it is industrialized and there's a large portion of land where these creatures where there it's like perfect conditions for fossilization. So I guess that's why we find a lot of fossils from there.
Yeah. Yeah, fossils are not rare. Fossil exposures are.
Yeah. So, I mean, you
Yep.
can. Yeah, I live probably 2 hours from the coast, so we don't find like the big hadrosaurs and the tyrannosaurids and triceratops here, but we find a lot of petrified wood and fossilized shells and crabs and things like that. So I guess it's just all in relation to where you are.
Yeah. That's like I live in the middle of a Permian deposit, but all there's that's the top layer. So all of the Triassic and Jurassic and Cretaceous, all of that's been scoured away long ago. So whatever was here, we don't know about, but we had, you can only see what you can see.
And you can only dig so deep. So I mean,
Yeah.
and I guess there's no point in digging really, really, really deep because I mean, I guess all those fossils start somewhere.
True.
And I mean, I see these things where people are cracking open like million-year-old geodes. Think about like the weird bacteria that's not necessarily fossilized, but that's kind of preserved in that. Because they find like water in the geodes, and I mean, creatures live in the ocean.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
mean, like what is it like the tardigrades where they don't need like an atmosphere to live; they can just live out in space. So why wouldn't some weird ancestor of that have been around and got trapped in some water in a geode somewhere, and just now we're finding out about it, and we don't really know.
It's a good point. Yeah, you never know what could be there.
I mean, there's a lot that we'll probably never actually know about the prehistoric world, about even like prehistoric people.
Yeah, a lot of it is just educated guessing based on the small amount of evidence that we can see. You know, we can see where they lived, and we can kind of see their tools and their trash pits, so we kind of see what they were eating. But it's really hard to tell a lot about them. A lot of it is educated guessing.
So I mean, you're talking about what you can see what they're eating. You get like fossilized dinosaur feces. You call that coprolite, or
Yep,
yeah.
coprolite.
And I mean, you can usually tell in like a modern animal whenever you look at the feces, you can see what they had eaten or residue of what they're eating. Do you think that there's some way to do that with coprolite?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm sure they can probably CT scan them and see what's inside. And some of them, like you can see it on the surface. I have coprolites from Permian sharks, and you can see bits of bone and teeth on the surface of the coprolite. So you can see that oh well, here's a piece of K-cops, or here's a piece of this in it. So it was eating these other animals.
I mean, and I'm sure if you can do that with sharks, I don't see why you couldn't do that with like a dinosaur or coprolite. Because I'm
I think they have.
they have. Hmm.
I think so. I think they've done some studies on some of them to see what all has been in some of them.
Because I mean, You get like prehistoric plants too, but I guess you can't really check out which plant dinosaurs were mainly drawn to from just looking at the plant. So, but I guess if you look at like Triceratops coprolite and you find, oh, this type of Triceratops like these ferns, so maybe Triceratops were where ferns were, and that could lead you to be like, well, if Triceratops was there, then T Rex was there, and you can probably find a lot just based on what random plants you find. But I feel like it'd be difficult to determine that.
Well, difficult, but probably not impossible.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of species that we'll never even know about.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure there's some that there's simply nothing left of them anywhere that lived for millions of years and we'll never know.
I mean, you look at like a lot of these fish bones and modern bird bones. I mean, it's kind of amazing that we found something like Compsognathus or Archaeopteryx or these smaller dinosaurs, and that we've actually found that.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, that's just crazy to think about that. Even with those like hollowed bones that those smaller creatures had, that we've just still found them, that they're still there and we know about them now.
yeah. It takes a very special preservational area in order for those. Usually, something like a lake with a muddy bottom that where they could settle and be completely undisturbed as they were covered.
Yeah, I guess any dinosaur that drowned would have been pretty well preserved.
Yeah,
I mean, and I guess the theories will keep going. I mean, one day we might even discover that they could have had a lot of fat on their body and now they're just some weird big blubbering thing. Who knows? I mean,
yeah, yeah. I know for sure that the what we normally think of when we think of dinosaurs are probably not what they look like. They have a tendency to what they call shrink wrap. You
yeah, they
know,
were wrapped and you can like see the skull structure, but that's not really accurate.
yeah,
I mean, of course, you can determine what its head would look like based on the skull. Like, you look like a hadrosaur. Of course, it's not going to have like lips because it has a beak. You're like, well, yeah. I mean, the duck build. They got this weird duck bill. They're not going to have this, and this part's going to be exposed, but that also doesn't mean that like you're going to see the tight skin and you're going to see the weird hole around the eye and the hole behind the eye, and even like on this Allosaurus, you see this part where it's kind of like the skin looks like it's tight around it. You
yeah.
see like,
It most likely had more fat or tissue in there and would not have looked exactly like that.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, like you look at like a person, as long as he's not starving to death. I mean, you can't really see the complete outline of their skull.
Right.
And you can't really do that with most animals. Which is crazy to think about all the like tissue and fat and skin like that's like basically just gone. And I guess if you find like bones of one dinosaur that was like eaten, like a T-Rex, I mean, it's not gonna really pay attention to the small bone that it accidentally ate whenever it's chowing down on something. Do you think that that could be part of the reason we don't have any complete skeletons? or we don't have a lot of complete skeletons.
And I'm sure feeding behavior probably plays a lot plays a large part in that, because anything that died would have been eaten by something unless some really rare situation happened to get it immediately covered, and covered in a way that didn't like break it apart as it did it.
I guess the KT extinction would have been one of those really rare things, but also, I mean, a big rock crashes into the earth. I'm sure it would have flung the dinosaurs away and like ripped them apart, and the ones right next to the impact zone are obviously gone.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to find a lot that's there because a giant rock smashed into the earth. It'd be kind of hard to be like, hey, there was a sauropod here, and it's like, how do you know? A giant rock crushed it.
Right.
Also, have they like recovered that meteor, or is that just
I
still?
No, I don't think there's anything left of it. Like, they found, you know, the in the crater itself, debris that is not typical of Earth rock. So they, you know, that's where they think it went to. Like, it basically vaporized with the surrounding rock that it impacted into.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a major play in that. Also, I guess erosion doesn't just. I mean, I guess asteroids would erode too if they're on a planet. So I guess that too.
Yeah.
And that was millions of years ago. I don't see why a meteorite that was already, or a meteor that was already burning up in the atmosphere, that impacted Earth and like slammed into the ground and broke apart, why all those parts aren't like just eroding somewhere. I mean, I guess it'd be hard to preserve something like that without special care on it.
I think just the impact itself destroyed it. It
Yeah.
basically vaporized and turned to dust, which is what
Mm.
we find in the KT boundary. That's why the KT boundary is identifiable, because it's full of the iridium and all the other minerals that aren't common on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess whenever it slammed into the entire Earth, it broke up into millions upon millions of pieces and just flung around the planet.
Most likely.
I mean, that's probably how we got a lot of those minerals in the first place. I mean, the just the concept that like these creatures were just, because you say like 66 million years ago, 66 isn't a big number, and then you don't really have anything to like compare it to. There's nothing to compare that distance of time to. So it doesn't, you can say that to somebody and it doesn't really sound like a lot, but like that is a lot of time. That there's so much time between humans and the dinosaurs that we don't like actually full, I feel like that isn't fully acknowledged and fully understood.
Yep, it is deep time. There's definitely a whole lot that has happened in between.
I mean, I guess pterosaurs, there'd be, I mean, their bones were definitely hollow because they were the ones flying around. So I guess a lot of them weren't preserved.
Yep.
Mm. Where do you think the most like common place for pterosaurs to be found would be?
I know Kansas has a few of them.
Kansas? I mean,
I don't know what other areas are. I know there's other areas that are producing them, but I'm not sure where. But yeah, they've been found a lot in the uh, who was the Western Interior Seaway and the chalk deposits that settled out of the ocean back then. They found quite a few.
Pterosaurs, yeah. So I guess conditions for like something like a sauropod versus like a pterosaur would be vastly different. Like I feel like it would be. This could just me just be speaking to speak. I mean, I feel like sauropod bones would be easier to preserve than the long, thin structure of like pterosaur bird or
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you look at like a sauropod, their bones are like so dense and they're massive. I mean, you always see
Yeah,
the
they
famous
they
picture.
yeah, sauropod bones definitely could withstand a lot of abuse and weathering. They could have probably laid out for decades and still end up being fossilized without a whole lot of damage to them just because of the mass.
I mean, you always see the famous picture of one of the people who dug up the sauropod like leg, and they're laying beside it, and it's bigger than they are, and it's like the just vast size of these creatures, like Argentinosaurus.
Yeah,
It was just so massive, and it's just so odd to think about that. 'Cause,
yeah, they're way bigger than anything we're used to seeing, and it's impressive to like when you see the skeletons reconstructed in a museum, just to stand there and see firsthand how big they are is impressive.
I mean, yeah, and it's also so odd seeing like a dinosaur not compared to a person in size. So like, I don't know if you watched it, but the show Prehistoric Planet,
Hmm.
you see these like big old sauropods, and you're look on TV just and you have nothing to compare it to but like another sauropod, and you're like, well, it doesn't look that big. And then they're like, they'll show one dinosaur and they're like, this dinosaur is as big as a human, and you're like, oh my god, the sauropod is massive.
Yeah,
It's so just ginormous, and it doesn't like you see these like images where they'll be like, this is Brachiosaurus compared to Steve. Steve is 6 foot tall, and you see like the Brachiosaurus is like 40 of him tall, and you're like, I don't. It's just like hard to comprehend like the size and the time that these creatures existed.
oh yeah, definitely.
Mm. Also, it's odd to think about that the air quality would have been so much different back then, and that's why they could grow bigger.
Yeah, I've heard that as a theory. I've heard it also be disputed, so I'm not 100% if it was really the oxygen content that allowed them to grow that big or not.
I mean,
I think it's as good a theory as anything.
it could have been anything. It could have just been by like the luck of evolution that these creatures grew big like that. It could have been the smallest, most minuscule thing. Mm. Well, yeah, you probably got stuff to do and people to talk to. So
All right, well, hey, I appreciate having me on. It was good to talk with you.
it was great talking to you too. It's always just fun talking to just a fellow dinosaur lover in general.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anytime you get a couple dinosaur fanatics together, you can just sit there and talk for hours.
There's always something to bring up, something to talk about,
Yeah.
some new theory that's being founded. So I guess I'll let you go. Have a
All
great
right.
rest of your day.
You too.
I'll definitely try to stay in contact with you.
All righty. I'll talk with you later then.
talk with you later. Definitely.
All right, bye.
Bye. So that was Jason from Dinosaur Fiend. I'm going to show his Instagram account one more time. Please go check him out. Please go give him a follow. He's got a bunch of amazing fossil content. Him in front of a metal T-Rex, which is absolutely crazy. He's got a bunch of crazy fossil content. Please go check it out. Please go support him. He's an amazing person. And just want to keep him around, keep him motivated, keep him doing what he loves. And remember to follow me as well on Instagram for content on the podcast. Remember to check out the Prehistoric Life podcast website that we got set up. And also the YouTube channel for early release content. So please go check that out and go support Jason. I'm your host, Eric Crawford, signing off. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye. And remember, keep it prehistoric.